The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was the most beautiful place Ambassador Chen Wei had ever seen. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves. Thousands of alien beings filled the seats, their bodies made of light and stone and gas and flesh. Wei had dreamed of standing here since she was a child watching the stars from her window in Beijing today. That dream was dying. She stood at the center of the hall, wearing Earth's finest diplomatic uniform. Behind her stood her small delegation of 12 humans. They had traveled for 3 months through the dark spaces between stars to reach this station. They had prepared for years. Earth had waited for 300 years. The trials of ascendancy happened once every century. Species that passed the trials earned seats on the High Council. They gained access to technology that could heal any disease. They could travel anywhere in the galaxy. They became part of something bigger than themselves. Humanity wanted that. Humanity needed that. High Arbiter Thiessen floated forward. His body was made of living crystal, and light moved through him like blood through veins. He was ancient. He had judged these trials for 6,000 years. "Ambassador Wei," he said. His voice was like wind through glass. "The elder races have reviewed Earth's application." Wei felt her heart beating fast. She kept her face calm. Diplomats did not show fear. "We have made our decision," Thiessen continued. "Earth is classified as a Category 7 Deathworld. Your species evolved under conditions we consider unsurvivable. Your gravity is crushing. Your atmosphere is corrosive. Your wildlife is violent. Your bacteria could kill most species in hours." Wei opened her mouth to speak, but Thiessen raised a crystal hand. "We do not blame you for this. You did not choose your world. But we cannot allow you to compete in the trials. Your biology gives you advantages that other species cannot match. Your inclusion would be unfair." The hall was silent. 1,000 alien eyes watched Wei. "You're banning us," Wei said slowly. "Because we're too dangerous?" "We are protecting the integrity of the trials," said another voice. This one came from a cloud of purple gas that floated near Thiessen. This was First Mind Vahorix of the Morani. Humans can survive temperatures that would kill most beings. You can heal from wounds that would be fatal to others. Your endurance exceeds all known species. This is not competition. This would be slaughter. A clicking sound came from the third elder. The cricks were insects the size of horses, with shells of black armor and eyes like red stars. War leader Kethrick spoke through a translator device. "We have seen recordings of human soldiers. We have studied your history. You are predators. You are weapons. The trials are meant to test worthiness, not to watch monsters destroy everything in their path." Wei felt anger rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had to stay calm. Earth was counting on her. "We are not monsters," she said. "We are people. We have art and music and love. We have children who dream of seeing the stars. We came here in peace." "Your peace is temporary," Thiessen said. "Every species that evolves on a death world eventually turns violent. It is in your nature. We cannot take the risk." Wei looked around the great hall. She saw pity in some alien faces. She saw fear in others. She saw disgust in many more. They had already decided. They had probably decided before she even arrived. This meeting was just a show. "Is there nothing I can say to change your minds?" Wei asked. "Nothing," Thiessen replied. "The decision is final. Earth is prohibited from the trials of ascendancy. You may remain in Concord space as observers, but you will never sit on the High Council. You will never receive our technology. You will remain on your death world, where you belong." Wei stood very still. 300 years of waiting. 3 months of travel. A lifetime of hope. All of it was ending in this moment. Behind her, she heard someone crying softly. She did not turn to look. She could not show weakness now, but someone else did turn. Kira Okonkwo was 17 years old. She was the youngest member of the delegation, and she was only here because her mother was the team's xenobiologist. Kira had spent her whole life studying alien species. She had learned 6 alien languages. She had dreamed of the trials since she was old enough to understand what they meant. Now she watched as those dreams were crushed, and something cold and hard formed in her chest. The alien who was crying was a young Selketh, one of the newer species hoping to compete. The Selketh looked like tall, thin birds made of silver metal. This one had traveled even farther than the humans to be here. "Why is it crying?" Kira whispered to her mother. Dr. Amara Okonkwo looked sad. The Selketh come from a harsh world too. Not as harsh as Earth, but difficult. They were worried the elders might ban them as well. But they didn't. No, only us. Her mother's voice was bitter. Only the monsters. Kira watched the elders floating in their places of honor. They looked so certain, so satisfied. They had decided what humans were without ever meeting one. They had judged an entire species based on the planet they came from. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But what could she do? She was 17. She was nobody. She was just a girl who liked studying aliens and dreaming about stars. Ambassador Wei bowed stiffly to the elders. "I thank the Concord for their time," she said. Her voice was flat and dead. "Earth will remember this day." She turned and walked toward the exit. The delegation followed her. Kira was the last to leave. At the door, she stopped and looked back. Thiessen was already talking to other delegates, probably discussing the next species to be judged. He had already forgotten about the humans. They were not important enough to remember. Kira felt something burning inside her. It was not sadness. It was not fear. It was anger. She did not know it yet, but that anger would change everything. It would take her places she never imagined. It would cost her everything she had, but it would also open the stars. She turned away from the great hall and followed her people into the cold corridor beyond. Behind her, the Galactic Concord continued its ancient business, confident that the matter of Earth was settled forever. They were wrong. 3 days passed on the station. The human delegation was given small rooms in the visitor section, far from the important areas. They were allowed to stay and watch the trials, but they could not participate. They could look, but they could not touch. Most of the delegation spent their time preparing to go home. Ambassador Wei sent long messages to Earth, explaining what had happened. The responses that came back were full of anger and disappointment. Some people wanted to fight. Others wanted to give up. Nobody knew what to do. Kira spent her time differently. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Thessan's crystal face. She heard his words: monsters, weapons, unsurvivable. The words echoed in her head until she wanted to scream. So instead of sleeping, she read. The station's archive was open to all visitors. It contained millions of documents about the Galactic Concord, its history, and its laws. Most of it was boring. Trade agreements, border disputes, tax codes. But somewhere in all those documents, Kira hoped to find something useful. On the third night, she found it. She was reading the original trial charter, written 12,000 years ago when the Concord was first formed. The language was old and strange, but Kira had studied ancient texts before. She read slowly, carefully, looking for anything that might help. And there it was. The original charter said nothing about Deathworlds. It said nothing about biological advantages. It simply stated that any species that wished to prove itself worthy could enter the trials. Any species. Kira read further. She found the amendments that had been added over the centuries. The Deathworld classifications came later, about 8,000 years ago. They required unanimous approval from all elder races to become law. Her heart began to beat faster. She searched for the voting records. She found them buried in a secondary archive, covered in digital dust. Nobody had looked at them in thousands of years. The vote to ban Deathworld species had passed with 4 approvals and 1 abstention. The Vathkai approved. The Maharani approved. The Krix approved. A now extinct race called the Decini approved, but the 5th elder race, the Orokai, had abstained. The Orokai had vanished 8,000 years ago. Nobody knew what happened to them. They simply disappeared one day, leaving their cities empty and their ships floating dead in space. Their vote was recorded as abstaining in perpetuity. An abstention was not an approval. Kira, read the charter again, her hand shaking. The amendment required unanimous approval. 4 approvals and 1 abstention was not unanimous. The ban on Deathworld species had never been legally valid. She jumped up from her chair and ran to find Ambassador Wei. Wei was sitting in her quarters, staring at the wall. She looked tired and old. When Kira burst in, she barely looked up. "Ambassador, I found something," Kira said. She showed Wei the documents. She explained what she had found. Wei read slowly. Her eyes widened. Then her face fell. "It's a good argument," Wei said, "but they won't accept it. They'll find some way to dismiss it. They don't want us here. They have to follow their own laws," Kira said. "Laws can be interpreted many ways." Wei shook her head. "Even if you're right, they'll never let a human compete. The other species would protest. It would cause too much trouble." Kira had already thought about this. She had spent hours thinking about it. "What if I don't compete as Earth's champion?" She asked. Wei looked confused. "What do you mean?" Kira pulled up another document. The charter has something called the Wanderer Clause. It says that any being without a nation or affiliation can enter as an independent. They represent only themselves, not their species. "You would have to renounce your citizenship," Wei said slowly. "You would have to give up being human." "Not being human," Kira said. "Just being from Earth. Legally, I would belong to nobody. I would have no home, no people, no protection." Wei stared at her. "You're 17 years old. I know. You would be alone. Completely alone. If something happened to you, Earth could not help. Your mother could not help. Nobody can help, I know. The trials are dangerous. Species have died trying to complete them. You could die." Kira felt fear in her stomach, cold and heavy. But she also felt that burning anger, and the anger was stronger. "If I don't do this," she said, "then we just go home. We accept what they said about us. We accept that we're monsters, that we don't deserve to be here. I can't accept that. I won't." Wei was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, ships moved between the stars like fireflies in the dark. "Have you told your mother?" Wei asked finally. Kira shook her head. "She would try to stop me. She would be right to try. But she couldn't stop me. Nobody can. The Wanderer Clause is clear. Any being can invoke it. They don't need permission." Wei stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "If you do this," she said, "and if you fail, it will prove everything they said about us. They will say that humans are dangerous and foolish and reckless. And if I succeed..." Wei turned to look at her. For the first time in days, there was something like hope in her eyes. "If you succeed, everything changes." Kira nodded. Her decision was made. The next morning, she went to the trial registration office. She filed the documents that renounced her Earth citizenship. She declared herself a wanderer, belonging to no world and no people. She invoked her right to enter the trials alone. The registration official, a small creature made of shifting sand, looked at her documents with confusion. "This is irregular," it said. This has never happened before. Check the charter, Kira said. It's legal. The official checked. It checked again. It called its supervisor. The supervisor called the elders within hours. The entire Galactic Concord knew what had happened. A human girl had found a hole in their laws. She had given up her world, her people, her protection. She had made herself nothing, and now they could not stop her. High Arbiter Thiessen demanded a hearing. Legal experts argued for days. But the charter was clear. The Wanderer Clause was absolute. They could not refuse her without breaking their own most sacred laws. Kira watched the chaos she had caused. She watched the elders rage and argue. She watched ambassadors from 100 species whisper about the human girl, who had outsmarted the oldest civilization in the galaxy. Ambassador Wei came to see her one last time before the trials began. Your mother is furious. Wei said, I know. She loves you. I know that too. Kira felt tears in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I had to do this. Wei nodded. Then she did something unexpected. She hugged Kira tightly. Make them remember us, Wei whispered. Kira hugged her back. Then she turned and walked toward the trial chambers, leaving everything she loved behind. She was alone now. Truly alone, but she was not afraid. The Trials of Ascendancy had 7 tests. Each test was designed by a different elder race to measure something important: wisdom, endurance, combat, creation, empathy, sacrifice, unity. To pass the trials, a contestant had to complete all 7. Most species sent teams of their finest warriors, scholars, and diplomats. The Vethkai sent 20 crystal warriors who had trained for a century. The Mharani sent a collective mind of 50 individuals thinking as one. The Krix sent a war party of their deadliest fighters. Kira Okonkwo went alone. On the morning of the first test, she stood in the staging area and looked at her competition. They were giants and monsters and things she had no words for. They had claws and shells and bodies made of fire. They looked at her like she was an insect, something small and strange that had wandered into the wrong place. A Krix warrior walked past her. He was 3 times her size, covered in black armor that looked like it could stop bullets. Little human, he clicked through his translator. You should go home. You will die here. Kira looked up at him. Maybe, she said, but not today. The first trial was endurance. The Vethkai had designed it. Contestants were sent to a moon called Corveth. It was a frozen wasteland where the temperature dropped to 200 degrees below zero. There was no shelter. There was little food. The goal was simple: survive for as long as possible. Ships dropped the contestants at different points on the moon. Each one was given basic survival supplies. Nothing more. When Kira's ship landed, the cold hit her like a wall. Her breath froze in the air. Her fingers went numb in seconds. She started moving. Humans had learned long ago that movement meant warmth. Standing still meant death. The first day, 3 contestants died. Their bodies were found frozen solid, their internal systems shut down by the cold. They were species from warm worlds who had never known true winter. Kira built a shelter from ice blocks. She ate the emergency rations slowly, making them last. She kept moving during the day and huddled in her shelter at night. The second day, 5 more contestants died. The third day, Kira found one of the Mharani floating in a canyon. The gaseous creature was barely moving. The cold was compressing its body, making it hard to think. You should keep going, the Mharani whispered. I am finished. Kira looked at it. She could walk away. The Mharani was her competition. Its death would make her survival easier, but that wasn't who she was. She spent an hour helping the Mharani to a warmer cave. She shared some of her rations. She stayed with it until it was stable. Why? The Marani asked. I am your enemy. No, Kira said. You're my competition. There's a difference. She left the cave and kept walking by the 7th day. Only 12 contestants remained. The Vethkai were doing well because they were made of crystal that didn't freeze. The Kricks were struggling because their insect bodies needed warmth. Kira was somewhere in the middle, cold and tired, but alive. On the 9th day, she emerged from her shelter to find the trial over. A ship was waiting to collect the survivors. She had passed. The trial judges were surprised. A human had survived the endurance test longer than half the species that had trained for years. They made notes in their records. They watched her more carefully now. The second trial was combat. The Kricks had designed this one. Contestants faced each other in single combat until one could no longer fight. There were rules against killing, but injuries were expected. Many contestants had died from their wounds. Kira's first opponent was a creature called a Vrix, a being made of liquid metal that could reshape itself into weapons. It was fast and dangerous, but it had never fought a human before. Kira didn't try to match its strength. She dodged. She moved. She let it tire itself out with attacks that missed by inches. On Earth, her ancestors had hunted by running their prey to exhaustion. They didn't need to be the fastest or the strongest. They just needed to keep going longer than anything else. After 4 hours, the Vrix was moving slowly. Its liquid body was losing shape. Kira struck once hard at its central mass. It collapsed into a puddle and could not reform. She won. Her second opponent was the Krix warrior who had mocked her in the staging area. His name was Kethrin, and he was one of the finest fighters his species had ever produced. The fight lasted 18 hours. Kethrin shattered 3 of her ribs in the first minute. The pain was terrible, but Kira had read about how humans processed pain. It didn't stop her from moving. It didn't stop her from thinking. She treated it like information, something to note and then ignore. She couldn't beat Kethrin in strength. She couldn't beat him in speed. But she could outlast him. Hour after hour, she dodged and retreated. She took hits that would have killed other species. She kept getting up. Again and again, she got up. Kethrin began to slow. His attacks became clumsy. Kricks were sprinters, designed for quick kills. They were not built for long battles. At hour 18, Kethrin fell to his knees. He could not rise. Kira stood over him, swaying, bleeding, barely conscious. But standing. How? Kethrin asked, his voice weak. How do you keep going? Kira looked at him. Blood dripped from her face. Because I have to, she said. She won. The third trial was empathy. The Marani designed this test. Contestants were connected through machines to the minds of completely alien beings. They had to experience existence through senses they didn't have, to understand thoughts that didn't match their own. Most species went mad. The difference was too great. Their minds couldn't handle being something completely other. When they connected Kira to a Vethkai mind, she felt what it was like to exist as crystal. She felt time moving differently. She felt light as food. It was strange and beautiful and terrifying. When they connected her to a Marani mind, she experienced being a cloud. She felt herself spreading and contracting. She felt thoughts as pressure waves. When they disconnected her, she was crying. The judges were shocked. How did you survive? They asked. Your brain should have broken. Kira wiped her tears. Humans have been imagining ourselves as other things since we first existed, she said. We tell stories about being animals and gods and monsters. We write books where we pretend to be aliens. We call it imagination. We call it empathy. She paused, looking at them with eyes that had seen what it meant to be crystal and cloud and a dozen other things. You think we're just weapons, she said. Just monsters. But we've spent our whole existence trying to understand what it's like to be something other than ourselves. That's not monstrous. That's human. She passed the empathy trial with the highest score in 3,000 years. The galaxy was watching now. The Deathworld girl was more than surviving. She was succeeding. 4 trials down. 3 to go, and Kira kept walking forward. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. On 1,000 worlds, beings watched their screens and talked about the human girl. Some admired her. Some feared her. Some hated her. But everyone knew her name, Kira Okonkwo, the Deathworld girl, the one who refused to lose. The elder races were not happy. High Arbiter Thiessen called an emergency meeting in his private chambers. The leaders of the Vethkai, the Morani, and the Krix gathered to discuss what they called the human problem. She has completed 4 trials, Thiessen said. His crystal body flickered with angry light. 4. No new species has ever advanced this far on their first attempt. She's making a mockery of our system, First Mind Vihorix of the Morani said. If she completes the trials, we will have to accept humans as equals. Our entire classification system will collapse. Then we must stop her, War Leader Kethrix clicked. There are ways. Accidents happen in the trials. Thiessen raised a hand. We cannot murder a contestant. It would destroy our authority. Other species would never trust us again. Then what do you suggest? Vihorix asked. Before Thiessen could answer, a new voice spoke from the doorway. I suggest you stop being cowards. The elders turned. A young Krix stood there, his armor still scratched from the combat trial. His name was Kethrin, the warrior Kira had defeated. You were not invited to this meeting, Kethrix said coldly. No, Kethrin agreed. But I have something to say. He walked into the room without permission. The guards moved to stop him, but he ignored them. I fought the human, he said. For 18 hours I fought her. I broke her bones. I made her bleed. And she would not stop. She kept getting up. Again and again, she got up. He looked at the elders with something like disgust. You call her a monster. You call her a weapon. But I looked into her eyes, and I saw something different. I saw someone who believes in something so strongly that she will break herself for it. I saw someone who will not give up, no matter what. He pointed at Thiessen. You are afraid of her. Not because she is dangerous, but because she is proving you wrong. You said humans were mindless killers, and she has shown more honor than most beings I have known. She is still a Deathworlder, Thiessen said. She is still following every rule, Kethrin interrupted. She is bleeding and suffering and winning fairly. And you want to stop her because you don't like what that means. He turned and walked toward the door. At the entrance, he stopped. My people have a saying. The truth of a warrior is shown in battle. I have seen her truth. It is not monstrous. It is magnificent. He left. The elder races sat in silence. They did not try to stop Kira, but they watched her with new eyes. And not all of those eyes were friendly. The 5th trial was creation. Contestants had to build something new, something that had never existed before. Kira spent 3 days without sleep, designing a translation device that could work with any language, even ones that hadn't been invented yet. It was based on patterns she had noticed during the empathy trial. The judges were impressed. They gave her passing marks. The 6th trial was sacrifice. This trial was designed by a race that no longer existed. Nobody remembered exactly what they were testing for. But the trial had been run the same way for 10,000 years. Contestants entered a simulation. The simulation felt completely real. Inside, they faced a choice: save themselves or save others. Kira entered the simulation. She found herself on a spaceship called the Meridian. Alarms were screaming. The ship was falling toward a sun, and 30,000 beings were trapped inside. They were Selkith, the bird-like species she had seen crying in the Great Hall. The simulation gave her two options. She could take the only escape pod and save herself. Or she could stay on the ship and try to fix the engines. If she took the escape pod, she would live. If she stayed, she would almost certainly die. Kira didn't hesitate. She ran to the engine room. She worked for hours, trying to fix systems she barely understood. The heat grew unbearable. The ship shook as it entered the sun's gravity. She burned her hands on hot metal. She breathed air that scorched her lungs. She saved the ship, but she didn't save herself. The engine room collapsed around her. Fire filled her vision. She felt pain beyond anything she had experienced before. Then everything went dark. She woke up in a medical bay. Her heart had stopped in the simulation. The trial safety systems had pulled her out and restarted it. She was alive, but barely. The simulation had caused real damage to her body. The neural connection had burned pathways in her brain. Her hands shook constantly. Her words came slowly, like they had to fight their way out of her mouth. A medical officer examined her. "You should not have survived," he said. "The damage to your nervous system is severe." "But I did survive," Kira said. Her voice was rough and broken. "You may not recover fully. Your coordination is damaged. Your speech centers are affected. You will struggle with the final trial." Kira looked at her trembling hands. She tried to make a fist, but her fingers wouldn't cooperate. "Why did you do it?" the officer asked. "The Selkith in the simulation weren't even real. They weren't even your species. You died for nothing." Kira thought about the question for a long time. "They were people," she finally said. "Real or not, they were people. They were scared. They needed help. What kind of person would I be if I walked away?" The officer had no answer. Ambassador Wei came to visit her that night. The ambassador looked older than she had a month ago. Worry had carved lines into her face. "You don't have to finish," Wei said. "You've already proven our point. You've shown the galaxy what humans can do." Kira shook her head. The movement made her dizzy, but she ignored it. "If I quit now, they'll say we can't finish what we start. They'll say we're dangerous, but not dependable." She met Wei's eyes. "I didn't give up my world to prove half a point. You could die. I could have died a dozen times already." Kira tried to smile. Her face didn't quite cooperate. "One more trial. That's all." Wei sat with her for a long time. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Wei stood. "Your mother wants you to know she's proud of you," Wei said. "She's angry and scared and wants to kill everyone who let this happen. But she's proud." Kira felt tears in her eyes. "Tell her I love her. Tell her yourself. When this is over." Wei left. Kira sat alone in the medical bay, looking at her broken hands. One more trial. She would finish this, or she would die trying. The final trial was Unity. It was held in the Grand Amphitheater of the Concord, the largest space in the known galaxy. Millions of beings watched on screens across 1,000 worlds. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The Unity trial required contestants to do something that seemed impossible. Bring peace to 3 species that hated each other. Real species. Real hatreds. Real consequences. For Kira's trial, the Concord chose 3 species on the edge of war. The Vethkai wanted to expand their mining operations into new territory. The Maharani claimed those same regions as sacred atmospheric space. And the Selkith, the young bird-like species Kira had saved in the simulation, were caught in the middle, their colony worlds threatened by both sides. Kira entered the amphitheater limping. Her hands shook at her sides. Her voice, when she spoke, was slow and rough. The neural damage from the sacrifice trial had not healed. She looked small and broken, standing before the delegations. A damaged human girl facing diplomats who had negotiated treaties for thousands of years. The HFY representative spoke first. "This is absurd. We are supposed to take direction from this creature? She has earned the right to be here," said a Selkith delegate. "More than earned it. She nearly died saving a simulation of our people," another Selkith added. "She has more honor than most of this chamber." The Morani representative pulsed with angry colors. "Honor does not solve territorial disputes. The atmospheric rights belong to us. The mineral resources belong to us," the HFY countered. "And our colonies will burn while you argue," the Selkith said within minutes. The negotiation had dissolved into shouting. Ancient grudges surfaced. Accusations flew back and forth. The delegates forgot about Kira entirely, too focused on their own anger. Kira watched them. She had studied these species for days, learning everything she could about their histories and cultures. She knew why they hated each other. She knew the wounds that had never healed. She also knew that talking about territory and resources would not help. The real problems were deeper than that. She raised her hand. Nobody noticed. She raised it again. Still nothing. Finally, she did something unexpected. She sat down on the floor of the amphitheater. She sat right in the middle of the delegations, cross-legged like a child. The shouting stopped. Everyone stared at her. "What are you doing?" the HFY demanded. "Waiting," Kira said. Her voice was calm. "You can keep shouting if you want. I have time." The delegates looked at each other uncertainly. Nobody knew what to do. In the silence, Kira began to speak. "I want to tell you a story," she said, "about my world." She told them about Earth. She told them about the wars humans had fought, the millions who had died because of borders and resources and fear. She told them about the moments when everything seemed hopeless, when hatred seemed too strong to overcome. And then she told them about the moments when humans chose differently. She told them about enemies who became friends, about hands reaching across divides, about peace treaties signed after centuries of bloodshed, about people who decided that their children deserved something better than endless war. "We nearly destroyed ourselves," she said. "Many times. We came so close to the end. But we didn't end. We kept finding ways back. Not because we're special, not because we're better, but because we wanted to live more than we wanted to win." She looked at each delegation in turn. "I've been inside your minds," she said. "During the empathy trial, I felt what you feel. I know your fears." She looked at the HFY. "You're afraid of becoming irrelevant. Younger species are rising, and you don't know if you matter anymore." She looked at the Morani. "You're afraid of being forgotten. Your kind is ancient, but you feel the universe moving on without you." She looked at the Selkith. "You're afraid you'll never be seen as equals. No matter how hard you try, the older species always treat you like children." Silence filled the amphitheater. "Those fears don't make you enemies," Kira said. "They make you the same. You're all afraid of the same thing, not mattering, not having a future." She struggled to her feet. Her hands trembled. Her legs shook. But she stood. "I'm not going to tell you how to divide territory. I'm not going to draw lines on maps. That's not what you need." She looked at them with eyes that had seen too much. "You need to decide what matters more, winning today or surviving tomorrow. You need to ask yourselves what you want your children to inherit. A universe of endless war? Or something better?" The young Selkith delegate spoke first. "What would you propose?" Kira almost smiled. "I propose you stop negotiating like you're trying to win. Start negotiating like you're trying to survive. Together, share the territory. Mix your populations. Make it so that hurting them means hurting yourselves. That's naive, the Vethkai said. But his voice was uncertain. Maybe, Kira said. But I didn't give up my world, my family, everything I loved, to watch the galaxy tear itself apart over mineral rights. She paused. The silence stretched. I came here to prove that humans deserve a place among you. But somewhere along the way, I realized something. The place doesn't matter. What matters is what we do with it. What matters is whether we make things better or worse. She looked at the elders, watching from their platform. You call this monsters. You call this weapons. But look at what I've done. I survived your trials. I saved people I'd never met. I sat on the floor and told you stories about hope. She spread her trembling hands. Is that what monsters do? High Arbiter Thiessen was silent. The negotiations continued, but the tone had changed. Instead of demands, there were questions. Instead of threats, there were possibilities. The delegates began talking about shared stations and joint ventures. They began seeing each other as partners instead of enemies. 14 hours later, they signed an accord that the Unity trial was over. Kira had passed. When the announcement came, the amphitheater erupted in chaos. Beings cheered and wept and stared in disbelief. A human had completed the trials of ascendancy. High Arbiter Thiessen approached Kira. His crystal body moved slowly, as if the weight of centuries pressed down on him. You have completed the trials, he said. By our own laws, you have earned a seat on the High Council. I don't want a seat, Kira said. Thiessen's light flickered with confusion. Then, what do you want? Kira thought about all the species out there who had been told they were too dangerous, too primitive, too wrong. She thought about all the dreams that had died because someone drew a line and said, "You can't cross this." I want you to tear up the Deathworld classifications, she said. All of them. I want you to stop telling species what they are based on, where they come from. I want you to judge people by what they do, not what you're afraid they might do. Thiessen stared at her. You would trade your victory for a principle? I already traded my homeworld for a principle, Kira said. This is easy. 1 month later, the Galactic Concord ratified the Okonkwo Amendment. No species would ever again be banned from the trials based on their world of origin. The Deathworld classifications were abolished. Kira's Earth citizenship was restored. She was offered seats on councils and positions of power across the galaxy. She refused them all. Instead, she went home. Lagos was hot and loud and beautiful. Her mother was waiting at the door of their small apartment. They held each other for a long time without speaking. That night, Kira sat on her bed and looked out the window at the stars. They seemed closer now, somehow, like doors waiting to be opened, across the galaxy, on worlds she would never visit. Young beings from dangerous planets looked up at those same stars. They had heard the story of the Deathworld girl who refused to accept Umeds. They had watched her break every expectation, and they began to dream. Kira, Okonkwo hadn't just altered the rules. She had rewritten them, and the galaxy would never be the same.